It was a quiet Sunday morning when I came home early from my run. Not drastically early, maybe 20 minutes ahead of schedule, but enough to make the timing feel off. I remember that the streets were quieter than usual, the air a little cooler. The sun hadn't burned through the morning haze yet, and the neighborhood felt like it was still asleep. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. My plan was to stretch out on the back patio, hydrate, maybe make some eggs. I was tired in that good, worn-out kind of way that runners chase. But the moment I stepped inside, something shifted. At first it was subtle. The air in the house was warmer than it should have been. Not uncomfortable, just lived in. But I had left the place completely empty not long ago. Then my eyes caught something in the hallway just past the coat rack near the bench where we throw our gym bags. A pair of men's sneakers. Black, size 12s by the look of them. Not mine. Not anyone's I recognized. Definitely not Lena's cousin's. I knew that immediately, and not just because I'd seen her cousin's shoes a dozen times over the years, small, colorful, always running shoes. These were different. They had that broken-in sag to them, the kind of wear that said the owner came by often enough to feel comfortable leaving them untucked, facing the wrong direction. I stood there for a beat. Just stood there, listening. The house was quiet. Not silent, just quiet in that unnatural way, like when someone's trying to be quiet. That's when I noticed the smell. Coffee. Not leftover coffee. Fresh. The good kind too, the beans I keep in a sealed tin in the back of the pantry. I followed it to the kitchen. 2 mugs sat on the table. One of them, mine. My mug. The chipped blue one with the smudged "World's Okayest Husband" print Lena got me as a joke 3 anniversaries ago. I always used it. The other was a white mug we kept in the back of the cabinet, only brought out when we had guests. That one was mostly empty, the brown ring at the bottom barely drying. Still, I didn't jump to conclusions. Not right away. I walked further in, my sneakers oddly loud on the floor. I noticed the couch pillow was a little out of place. A folded blanket thrown lazily across the armrest like it had just been used. There was a faint trace of men's cologne in the air, not mine. A scent I couldn't place. Then I heard the bathroom door click open. Lena stepped out wrapped in her robe, her hair damp. She had that look on her face, surprise, quickly masked by a calm, practiced expression. She didn't flinch. Didn't stammer. "Oh," she said, casual as ever, "I didn't expect you back so soon. My cousin dropped by, he was in the area. Didn't stay long, just stopped in for a quick coffee before heading to that car show thing over in Ridgewood." Her voice was light. Her tone even. No nerves, no cracks. But something about it felt too smooth. Too rehearsed. Like she'd practiced that line in the mirror once or twice just to get the rhythm right. I nodded slowly. "That's so?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "You just missed him, actually. I told him you were out running, but he couldn't stay. Work stuff." She crossed the kitchen, picked up the white mug, and brought it to the sink like it was no big deal. But my eyes followed her every move. And I noticed, right then, how she didn't even look at the other mug, my mug. Like acknowledging it would make the story less believable. I didn't press. I told myself maybe it was true. Maybe her cousin had stopped by and I was overthinking everything. But something inside me had shifted. Not panic. Not anger. Just a cold weight in my stomach. Instinct. That old gut feeling we learned to ignore in the name of trust. I went about my morning. Stretched. Took a longer than usual shower. Sat out back and pretended to read the paper while my mind spiraled. That image, the sneakers, the 2 mugs, her robe played over and over like a reel on loop. And it wasn't just the things I saw. It was the timing. The atmosphere. The way she delivered the story so effortlessly. Too effortlessly. Lena didn't drink coffee with just anyone. She'd always said it was her comfort ritual, something in asterisk mate she preferred to share with people she genuinely liked. She made fun of me when I used to toss back gas station coffee during our first year together. Now she ground beans by hand and served it in curated mugs like it was a ceremony. And she used my mug. That stung in a way I didn't fully understand at the time. I sat in the living room later, watching her clean up, moving about like nothing had happened. She hummed under her breath a song she used to hum when we first started dating. For a second, I almost convinced myself I was crazy. That I was reading too much into nothing. But that image of the sneakers haunted me. Her cousin had tiny feet, I knew because we joked about it at Thanksgiving. Those shoes were wide and long and definitely worn. That meant someone had been in our home. Someone who didn't expect me back so soon. Someone familiar enough with Lena to make themselves comfortable. Someone she wasn't rattled by. That was what got me more than the shoes, more than the coffee. It was her calm. I'd seen Lena flustered. When she burns a batch of cookies. When the internet cuts out during a Zoom call. She doesn't hide it well. But this? She was smooth. Too smooth. It made me start rewinding the past few weeks in my head like a detective watching security footage. The nights she claimed to be exhausted and went to bed early, locking the bedroom door behind her. The afternoons she ran errands and came back with nothing but a strange kind of glow. The way she'd changed her phone case recently and started turning the screen face down when we were together. The music she listened to while cooking had changed too, more moody, less upbeat. But those were just dots at that point. Unconnected. Too easy to dismiss individually. Still, I noticed them now. I couldn't unsee the patterns, couldn't unhear the way her voice had changed when she said my name. Used to be warm. Now it just sounded polite. I didn't confront her. I didn't flip the table or demand answers. That's not me. I've never believed in confrontation for the sake of drama. And back then, I still wanted to believe there was an explanation that didn't end in heartbreak. But something broke that day. Quietly. Without a sound. Like a window left open during a storm, letting in just enough rain to ruin the floorboards before you even realize you've got a problem. I sat there that night beside her on the couch, watching a movie we'd seen a dozen times. She leaned her head on my shoulder. But it felt different. Heavier. Or maybe it was me who had changed. I closed my eyes and tried to picture who had been here that morning. What he looked like. What his shoes sounded like on our floors. If he sat in my chair. If he touched her hand when he reached for the sugar. If she laughed the way she used to laugh with me. I didn't sleep much that night. My body was tired, but my mind kept playing out scenes that hadn't happened, at least not in front of me. Imaginary conversations. Hands brushing. A voice I didn't recognize saying her name in my home. It was just a pair of shoes. Just a half-full mug. Just a calm lie told with a smile. But sometimes that's all it takes. In the days that followed, it was like someone had handed me a new set of glasses, ones that finally let me see clearly what I had been refusing to look at. It wasn't that Lena had changed overnight. That would have been easier to spot. No, it was that I had slowly, stubbornly convinced myself that everything was fine. That the little things didn't matter. That people grow apart sometimes and maybe it was just a phase. But after that morning, the shoes, the mug, her story, I couldn't unsee it. I started noticing everything. Every moment, every interaction was a test I didn't know I was grading until I saw it fail. It started small. The emotional distance that had crept in unnoticed. Conversations that once flowed naturally had started feeling transactional, like passing notes in a business meeting. Her "how was your day" didn't carry the warmth it used to. It sounded like background noise, a line she had to recite before getting back to her phone. And it wasn't just tone, it was her eyes. She used to look at me when I spoke. Now her eyes darted past me toward the window or her phone or whatever was more interesting at the moment. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. But I wasn't. There were the excuses too, ones I used to accept without a second thought. I had always been the kind of husband who respected space, trusted without needing to be reassured. That used to feel like strength. Now it felt like foolishness. Almost every night, Lena had some reason to not sit next to me on the couch. Too tired, a headache, work emails to catch up on. And when she did sit beside me, she always seemed half-present, her body turned away slightly, her replies delayed or clipped. The physical space between us had become a chasm. She didn't touch me much anymore, and when I reached out, an arm around her shoulder, a brush of fingers on her back, she'd stiffened just enough to notice. Not a full recoil, but enough that I felt it in my gut. That kind of thing doesn't lie. That subtle withdrawal of warmth. It's not loud, but it's definitive. Then came the late-night phone calls. They'd started maybe a month earlier, but now I saw them differently. Always taken outside, always when she thought I wouldn't notice. She'd step onto the back porch, phone pressed tightly to her ear, whispering. I asked once who it was. She said it was her boss. He gets stressed out, she told me. I'm one of the only ones he trusts. I didn't push. I should have. That was my pattern, giving her the benefit of the doubt so many times I lost count. Then there was the laptop. It used to be out in the open, sitting on the dining room table or the kitchen counter. Now it was always in her bag. When she did use it, it was with her back to me. And every time I entered the room, the screen would go dark. I'm not exaggerating, it happened like clockwork. I even tried timing it. 10 steps from the hallway to the kitchen? Screen closed. She'd smile. Say, "Oh, you startled me." But it wasn't surprise. It was reflex. A rehearsed move. And her phone. That was a whole different language. Notifications used to pop up like normal texts, social media alerts, emails. Now they came through silently with no preview. She'd glance at her screen, quickly flip it over, and continue whatever half-hearted conversation we were having. When I asked if she had changed her settings, she shrugged. Said it was for focus. But the lock screen told a different story, new passcode. One she didn't offer. One I never asked for because I was trying not to be that guy. But deep down, I knew what it meant. There were other things too. Things I hadn't let myself question until now. The way she had started wearing makeup around the house, subtle but there. Lip gloss to answer emails. Mascara for a Zoom call with a coworker I'd never met. New clothes appeared in her closet that I hadn't seen her buy. I even joked once, new dress? I didn't see the Amazon box. She laughed and said, picked it up in town. That was it. No details. I let it go. I let a lot of things go. She also started spending more time out for errands, but the timing never made sense. An hour and a half for a grocery run? Coming back with 2 bags and a receipt that didn't match what was in them? I shrugged it off. Told myself maybe she stopped for a smoothie or needed some air. Even her browser history disappeared. That one stung in a quiet, unexplainable way. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. But one night, when she fell asleep early on the couch, I opened her laptop, not to search, just to check the weather, actually. But instinct made me click. Chrome opened to a blank tab. No history. Cleared. I opened Safari. Same thing. Firefox? Nothing. Who even uses all 3 browsers unless they're covering their tracks? That's when I stopped denying what I already knew. And here's the kicker, the worst part, maybe? It wasn't the coffee mug. It wasn't the new passwords or the phone turned face down. It wasn't even the half-lies and excuses I used to write off as stress. It was the way she said my name. Ethan. She used to say it like it belonged to her. Like it was our thing. Sometimes playful, sometimes soft, sometimes whispered across a pillow in the early morning hours. That name used to mean something when it came from her lips. Now it sounded like a placeholder. A name she used the way someone uses sir at a checkout line. Polite. Distant. Like she was speaking to a version of me she no longer recognized. I started noticing that in the smallest moments, when I handed her the keys, when she asked if I wanted something from the store, when I said goodnight. Good night, Ethan, she'd reply, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I tried telling myself this was salvageable. That couples go through rough patches. That maybe she was tired, maybe something at work was stressing her out. Maybe it wasn't another person. Maybe it was just life. But that hope shrank a little more every day. The Lena I knew, the woman who once couldn't go an hour without texting me something funny or weird or sweet, had vanished. In her place was someone who looked like her, moved like her, even slept in the same bed. But she wasn't her. Not really. She was somewhere else now, emotionally. Somewhere I wasn't invited. I hadn't confronted her yet. I didn't see the point. Not without proof. Not without knowing for sure. Because once I asked, once I put the question into the air, there was no taking it back. No pretending everything was still fine. So instead, I watched. I collected every detail in silence, each one sliding into place like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle I never asked to solve. And with each one, the picture became clearer. Lena wasn't just drifting away. She had already gone. She was living a version of her life that didn't include me, at least, not in any way that mattered. And the worst part? I had seen it coming all along. It happened on a Wednesday. That part one remember because I was supposed to be on a job site in Blackstone until the evening, pouring concrete for a new retaining wall. But just after lunch, the client called off the afternoon. Forecast said thunderstorms, even though the sky still looked like it hadn't made up its mind. Either way, we packed up early and I was back in the truck by 1:30, heading home without texting Lena. I don't know why I didn't. Usually I'd shoot her a quick message, headed back, or job got rained out, but something told me not to. A flicker of impulse I didn't question at the time. Maybe I didn't want her to have a chance to prepare. Or maybe I was tired of giving her a warning. When I turned down our street, I noticed a car in the driveway that didn't belong there. A black sedan. Clean, newer model. Parked crooked like someone in a hurry. My stomach dipped, but I kept driving slowly, pretending to check my phone until I reached our curb. I pulled over 2 houses down and cut the engine. Just sat there for a minute, hands resting on the steering wheel, not moving. I stared at that car like it was a riddle. I didn't recognize it. Not a neighbor's. Not her cousin's. Not someone from work as far as I knew. And definitely not one of our friends. We didn't really have many who just dropped by, especially not unannounced. The curtains in the living room were pulled. That was unusual. Lena loved light, always cracked the blinds open to let the sun in. But now everything looked dim and quiet, like the house was holding its breath. I got out, walked up the sidewalk like I lived there, which technically I still did, and opened the front door. No keys. I still had my copy. She hadn't changed the locks. Not yet. The moment I stepped inside, it was like time slowed. The air was warm and still. I could hear something faint, voices. Not loud, not arguing. Just low and consistent, like the gentle hum of conversation. But it wasn't a podcast. Not music. This was human, real. I closed the door behind me without a sound and stepped out of my boots. The voices were coming from upstairs. The bedroom. The hallway creaked under my steps, so I walked along the rug, slow and deliberate. The bedroom door was cracked open maybe 2 inches, just enough to hear everything. I stopped. Listened. It was Lena. I'd recognize her voice in a stadium full of noise. But it wasn't her words at first that hit me, it was the way she said them. Soft, unguarded. The version of her I hadn't heard in months. The version she used to save for me. Then came laughter. A man's voice. I couldn't place it, but it wasn't nervous laughter. It was comfortable. Familiar. Like they did this often. I should have pushed the door open. Should have burst in, made it a scene. That's what people expect when they hear stories like this. But I didn't. I stood there with my ear near the frame, my hands clenched, heart in my throat, waiting for words I couldn't unhear. And they came. She was talking about me. I don't even know who he is anymore, she said. It's like I'm living with a stranger. The man said something I couldn't catch, a murmur, then she continued. It's not even about love, she said. It's about connection. And I haven't felt that with him in a long time. My knees almost buckled right then, but I held onto the door frame. Her voice dropped lower, like she was admitting a secret to herself more than to him. I keep thinking if he noticed, really noticed, maybe I wouldn't have let it get this far. But now? I don't know. Maybe it's too late. The man mumbled something again, and she laughed softly. Then I heard the rustle of bedsheets. I didn't need more. I backed away from the door, down the hallway, step by careful step. At the base of the stairs, I grabbed my boots and slipped out the front door like a ghost. I got back into my truck and sat there for a while. No music. No movement. I stared at the steering wheel like it might tell me what to do next. Shock is a funny thing. It doesn't always hit like a wave. Sometimes it creeps in, quiet and polite, like a guest you didn't invite who makes themselves at home anyway. I didn't cry. Didn't yell. I just sat there, empty, like someone had scooped the insides out of me. I thought about texting her. Thought about slashing the tires on that black sedan. Thought about pulling around the block and waiting for him to leave so I could get a good look at his face. But I didn't. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition and drove. I didn't go far, just down to the lake we used to visit when things were still good. I parked, got out, sat on one of the benches overlooking the water. There were a few ducks, some kids tossing stones. A couple holding hands passed behind me and I barely registered it. Everything felt far away. Like I was underwater. I kept hearing her voice in my head. That tone. That softness. The way she spoke when she used to sit across from me at our kitchen table in sweatpants, talking about nothing and everything. I keep thinking if he noticed. I wanted to scream. To shout I did notice. I just didn't want to believe it. I wanted to go back in time and shake myself by the shoulders. Tell him to open his eyes. But I also knew deep down I wasn't the only one responsible for the distance between us. Still, nothing could justify what I heard upstairs. That wasn't distance. That was betrayal. Eventually, I got up and drove to a hardware store. Bought a padlock and some moving boxes. I didn't have a full plan yet, but something had shifted. I couldn't go back to pretending. By the time I pulled back into our driveway, the black car was gone. The house looked normal again. Innocent. I went inside. Lena was in the kitchen, barefoot, making tea. "Hey," she said with a smile, like it was any other day. "You're back early." "Yeah," I replied, and nothing more. She didn't ask questions. She never did when she didn't want answers. That night, we ate dinner like normal. She talked about work. I nodded. I think I smiled at one point, but inside I was somewhere else. My mind had already **n sorting through what came next. I lay awake long after she fell asleep. The ceiling above me felt miles away. Her back was turned, her breathing slow. She looked peaceful, but all I could hear were her words. Maybe it's too late. And for the first time, I believed her. After that day, after hearing Lena's voice through the cracked door, hearing her say things I couldn't unhear, I stopped wondering if I was overthinking. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I stopped hoping. I started planning. There was no confrontation, no yelling, no drama. I think that's what kept me sane. If I had walked in and demanded answers, she would have cried. Maybe denied it. Maybe blamed me. And I probably would have stayed in that loop of emotional chaos, trying to untangle the words, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But I'd heard the truth in her own voice. She had already stepped out of the marriage. I was just the last to catch up. So I did what I had to do. The next morning, I got up before her, took my coffee out to the garage and sat on the old workbench I hadn't used in years. It smelled like sawdust and rust and oil-stained regrets. But I needed a place that wasn't touched by her. A place that was still mine. That's where I started my quiet escape. First thing, finances. I opened a separate checking account at a credit union 2 towns over. Set up online access, rerouted my direct deposit. Nothing big enough to trigger alarm, just one piece at a time. Then I removed myself from our shared credit card. I told the rep it was for budgeting purposes. She said, "Smart move." I didn't correct her. Next came the living arrangements. I scouted apartments for a few days. Something simple. I didn't need space, I needed peace. Ended up renting a 1-bedroom in Sparks. It was above a florist shop and smelled faintly like eucalyptus and cardboard. The landlord didn't ask questions. I paid first and last month's rent and said I'd be moving things in slowly. Back at the house, I started packing the essentials. 1 drawer at a time. 1 box at a time. I told Lena I was cleaning out clutter, donating things to Goodwill. She smiled. Said she was proud of me for finally tackling that garage mess. She had no idea I was leaving. And in a strange way, that made it easier. I started sleeping less. Not because of anxiety, but because I was finally focused. Focused in a way I hadn't been in months. I began spending most of my evenings in the garage. I fixed an old road bike I'd been meaning to repair. Took up woodworking again, started carving a simple end table. I liked the feel of shaping something real, something solid. And I joined a boxing class at a community center nearby. Nothing serious. Twice a week. Just enough to hit something that didn't hit back emotionally. The coach was an ex-Marine with a crooked nose and a decent sense of humor. He didn't ask about my past. Just said, "You move like a guy who's been carrying something heavy." I nodded. He didn't press. Every punch was therapy. Every jab, a thought I couldn't say out loud. Every hook, a memory I needed to destroy. It was the first time I felt strong in months. At home, I said little. I answered her questions. I nodded when she talked. I washed my dishes, folded my laundry. But I didn't reach out. I didn't ask how her day was. I didn't press her about the evenings she spent running errands. I let the silence speak for me. And she noticed. Something shifted in her too. But not the way you'd expect. It started with little things. She left a sticky note on my bathroom mirror. "Hope your day's better than yesterday." Smiley face. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it moved me, but because it felt like a message from someone who used to know me. Like she was writing to the memory of who I'd been. Then she started dressing nicer at home. Lipstick on a Thursday night. A new blouse for dinner she didn't mention buying. She sat closer to me on the couch again, her knee brushing mine like it used to. One night, she made my favorite pasta. The one she hadn't cooked in over a year, and lit a candle between us like we were playing house again. I ate it without a word. She watched me carefully, like she was measuring my reaction. But I didn't give her one, because it was too late. She could sense it, I think, that whatever part of me had once been clinging was now gone. Not in anger, not in bitterness. Just gone. Detached. Like a rope cut clean through. And that's what scared her most. Not the silence, not the space, but the fact that I had stopped needing anything from her at all. I still slept in our bed, but I started facing away. She asked once, "Are we okay?" I said, "I don't know." It was the closest I got to honesty. I began taking small loads to the apartment. A box of clothes. A stack of books. Some tools. She never asked where I was taking them. She was too afraid of the answer. One night, she walked into the garage while I was sanding down a table leg. "You've been out here a lot lately," she said. I nodded. Kept working. She sat on the old stool near the wall. "What are you building?" I didn't look up. "Something simple." She didn't speak for a while. Then, "You've been quiet." I turned off the sander and met her eyes. "So have you." She flinched a little. That was the only real reaction I got. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I feel like you're slipping away." I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned back against the bench. "Maybe I already have." She blinked fast like she was trying to process the words. Ethan. I know I've been distant, but I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About what we lost. I waited. She looked down at her hands. Do you ever think we can get back to what we had? It should have hurt. It should have cracked me open. But it didn't. Because I didn't believe her. Not anymore. No, I said quietly. I don't think that version of us exists anymore. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. She stood, nodded, and left the garage. That was the last time she tried to reach for me. In the final days, the silence between us felt less like tension and more like acceptance. She stopped trying to make conversation. I stopped pretending to listen. We coexisted like roommates, polite, distant, unfamiliar. I set the official move-out date for the following Saturday. I arranged for a small truck, called in a favor from a friend to help lift the heavy stuff. I didn't tell her until the night before. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I walked in, stood beside the armrest, and said, I'm moving out tomorrow. She looked up, blinked. Wait, what? I have a place in Sparks. Been staying there part-time. You didn't tell me. No. She stood slowly. Is this permanent? I didn't answer. I just turned and walked away. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I loaded the last of my boxes, nodded to my friend, and drove away. No big scene. No last glance. Just a quiet departure, deliberate, necessary. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure in the way people usually mean it. I just needed to leave the version of myself that stayed too long behind. I thought she might let it go quietly. But Lena, to her credit or maybe to her pride, didn't. It started the way most big moments start, with something small. A note on my windshield one morning after work. Just a folded piece of paper under the wiper with my name on it in her handwriting. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before opening it. There wasn't much written. Just, please come by Saturday morning. I want to talk. No fighting. No drama. Just clarity. I didn't respond. But I went. Not for her. For me. Saturday came cloudy and still. I pulled up to the house, our house, technically, though it already felt like a museum of a life I no longer belonged to. The yard was trimmed, the porch swept. It looked peaceful in a way that made me suspicious. Lena always cleaned when she was nervous. I knocked once. She opened the door almost immediately like she'd been waiting behind it the whole time. She looked curated. That's the word that came to mind. Not done up in a showy way, but intentional. Hair down, soft makeup, that light cotton dress she used to wear when we first moved in together. The kind of outfit meant to say, I'm safe. I'm familiar. I'm still me. But I didn't recognize her. Not really. The house was spotless. Candles lit. A small breakfast spread laid out on the table. She gestured for me to sit and I did without saying much. She poured coffee for both of us. I didn't touch mine. For a minute she just looked at me. Like she didn't know where to begin. Then she said, thank you for coming. I nodded. You asked. I showed up. She smiled faintly like she didn't expect a warmer response. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Me too. I don't want this to end badly, she said, eyes searching mine. I know we're not in a good place. And I know I'm responsible for a lot of that. I just wanted to talk before we make everything official. Before it's all settled. I stayed quiet. I miss you, she said. Silence. I miss us, Ethan. More silence. I know it's probably too late. I know I hurt you. I know I should have said something, done something sooner. But I was scared. I thought if I ignored the distance between us, it would close on its own. It didn't. I know, she whispered. I could tell she wanted me to ask questions. To make space for her explanations. But I didn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly sad. I was just done. She exhaled like she was bracing for impact. Do you think there's a way back? I didn't answer right away. I reached down, opened my bag, and placed a folder on the table. Inside, documents. Asset division. Utility transfers. A list of everything we still shared and instructions for how to separate it. A draft of a formal separation agreement with room for edits if needed. Lena stared at the folder like it had insulted her. This isn't what I meant. I know. She ran her fingers along the edge of the papers. You already had all this prepared. I've had it ready for a while. She swallowed hard. So that's it. This is the calmest version of it I can give you, I said. There's no yelling. No throwing blame back and forth. Just closure. Her voice broke then. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I looked at her. Really looked. You were already somewhere else, Lena. I just caught up. She covered her face with her hands for a second, then dropped them with a soft, tired laugh. I thought you'd be angry. I was. Then cold. I was that too. Now you're just free, I said, and it surprised even me how true it felt. We went over the documents. She asked a few questions. I explained things in simple terms. I'd had help from a lawyer, someone quiet, efficient, fair. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a clean break. When it was done, she walked me to the door. She didn't try to touch me. Didn't ask for a hug. I think she knew better. At the last second, she said, "You were a good husband, Ethan." I met her eyes. I tried to be. "I never stopped loving you," she added quickly. I tilted my head, not in agreement, not in disagreement. Just acknowledgement. "But you stopped choosing me," I said. "That's what mattered." I stepped outside, the late morning light filtering through the clouds. It smelled like rain was coming. As I walked to my truck, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest like she was holding herself together. I didn't look back. I drove slowly, not because I was uncertain, but because it felt like the final lap of something that had taken years to run. When I got home, my real home now, I put the folder in the filing cabinet, locked it, and made myself a new cup of coffee. Same brand. Different mug. The rest of that weekend passed like a soft exhale. I cleaned my new apartment. Put up a few pictures I hadn't unpacked yet. Cooked a quiet dinner. Took a walk around the block just to feel the air again. Lena texted me twice that evening. Once to say she signed the papers. Once to say, "I hope one day we can talk again." I didn't reply. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted to punish her. But because there was nothing left to say. I had spent too long begging for closeness. For effort. For answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask. And now I finally understood the truth. Peace doesn't always come with resolution. Sometimes it comes with walking away without demanding closure from the person who broke you. She had her reasons. I had mine. I went to bed early that night. Slept like a man who wasn't waiting for anything anymore.